Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and wars are going on multiple different fronts at the exact same time. A recipe for disaster as we reach a new age of warfare. And people are saying the quiet part out loud out of RT here. It says all of Gaza will be Jewish, Israeli minister says. Amichai Eliyahu dismisses calls to prevent starvation in the Palestinian enclave. Absolutely insane, as Trump is saying things like, hey, we gave them $60 million to feed the kids, and someone's stopping the food from getting in. Yeah, it's called the Israeli government. They armed and funded Hamas in the first place. But of course, this is after he gave $200 billion to Israel. This is after they gave Hellfire missiles to Israel to attack Iran. This is after we see a $1 trillion budget, the largest military spending budget in history signed by Trump, plus trillions and trillions of dollars more into AI warfare, which was signed on with Saudi Arabia and others. I mean, it's a joke. And, simultaneously, as we see these calls for an actual genocide, because if you're calling for the wiping out of all non-Jews in the place and erasing all of Gaza, that is indeed a call for genocide. Simultaneously, France is recognizing Palestine as a state. Now, Israel is attacking over this, but okay, this is something that we need to understand. This is in itself a psyop, because this is after over 100,000 men, women, and children, and mostly children, were killed. This is after the starving of these people. This is after the calls for the annexing of all this land for the Greater Israel Project. So this is kind of not exactly a great way to see justice. Of course, oh yeah, it's recognizing Palestine. Yeah, after the fact. Great. Where were you guys at the beginning of all this? And there's a lot happening right now with Thailand, with Taiwan and China, with Cambodia, with Pakistan and India, with Ukraine and Russia. Absolutely insane calls. This shortening of the deal between Ukraine and Russia's peace deal, according to Trump. Things are stepping up right now, and we need to dig into this today, my friends. Before we do, I urge you guys to check those links below. Check out whambeef.com and get stocked up today. 10 plus year shelf life, freeze-dried steak, 12 servings per bag. Don't depend on the rations down the road. Of course, there's freeze-dried chicken and ground beef as well. Use code WHAMBEEF, WAMBEEF, all one word, and you will get 20% off on your order. I highly recommend people get on this today. Guaranteed no mRNA, no lab-grown meat, all-American beef that's 100% natural. Check that out in the links below. And also make sure to check out our link for vni.life/WAM, WAM, below to get super supplements, and including things like Protovite, which I'm super excited about. Over 100 plus vitamins and minerals in one bottle, 30 servings, and of course it supports cellular health, longevity, vitality, immune system, etc. I urge you to check that link below and use code WAM15, WAM15, and you'll get 15% off on your order. I highly recommend people check this out. We have a lot on this coming up, so stay tuned. Now let's get into this. So all of Gaza will be Jewish, Israeli minister says, as we see out of Natural News here. Israeli minister sparks outrage with call to erase Gaza and resettle Jews. I mean, when people ask, why do they hate us so much? Why do they hate us so much? Well, this is a guy that's helping to ensure that this indeed happens, that people hate them, because he's sparking this outrage by calling for the erasing of an entire group of people, while claiming victimhood himself after years and years of saying that we need to erase Palestine and force mass migration, which Netanyahu brags about sending mass migration to the West. Israeli Heritage Minister Amichai Eliyahu sparked outrage by calling for Gaza's erasure and Jewish resettlement, declaring all of Gaza will be Jewish and dismissing humanitarian concerns like hunger. Over 59,000 Palestinians have reportedly been killed since October 2023, with 113 deaths from hunger. I think there's a much higher rate because a huge amount are undocumented there. The WHO warns of mass starvation due to Israel's blockade, while aid trucks remain stalled. Well, and they also bombed a bunch of aid trucks. And then in one case, as we reported at the time, they blew up an aid vehicle. They claimed initially, the Israeli government anyway, the IDF, said that it was a bunch of militants, Hamas militants, that they blew up. And then when they found their mass grave, when people found their mass grave, because the IDF just buried them all together in a mass grave, they found video footage from one of their cell phones that showed that they had flashing lights, glow vests, had ambulances, and this was a rescue operation for children that had been hurt, and also were bringing aid and medicine, etc. And on the video, the Israeli government just opened fire on them, even though it was clear that they were ambulances and aid officials. So then they buried them in a mass grave and lied about it. We see this all the time. Imagine, oh, well, we bombed that hospital because there's tunnels underneath it. Well, first of all, the Israeli government on record had funded and created the tunnels that we're seeing in parts of Gaza in the first place. So great excuse there. They've been caught countless times planting guns in MRI rooms where you could not keep a gun in an MRI room with massive magnets on the machines. It's so ridiculous. They've been caught 1, 2, 10, 1,000, 50,000 times lying. At this point, it just keeps continuing on and on and on as they try to justify their horrifying acts of violence against innocent civilians. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Ambassador Yechiel Litter distanced Israel from Eliyahu's comments, emphasizing officials' aid efforts. Opposition leader Yair Lapid condemned the rhetoric as damaging to Israel's moral and diplomatic standing. Yeah, because they don't want to say the quiet part out loud. And of course, Netanyahu called on Amalek after the attack on October 7th, where they did attacks on themselves and were aware of with documents from Egypt and, of course, Jordan and other places years in advance, including their own Operation Jericho Wall, which they wrote years before the attack, detailing the exact number of hostages, the exact time when it would happen, where it would happen, at a music festival, and which was moved last second to a border. We've gone into that a million times, but nonetheless. At the time, Netanyahu called on Amalek. Remember what Amalek has done to you. So this is a call for the wiping out of all men, women, and children, toddlers suckling at the teat, the animals, the food of anyone that is on that other side. This is something that is a call for genocide in the first place. And that was in 2023. And then people forget about it and they move on because there's too many stories in the news to focus on one thing or something that happened a few years ago, because that's part of the demoralization of civilization, my friends. Eliyahu's stance aligns with broader far-right efforts, including a Knesset conference promoting Jewish settlements in Gaza, supported by figures like Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich. Oh, Smotrich is horrible, and he was the one that was calling for the takeover of Syria, by the way, and Lebanon. And then within weeks, they're bombing Lebanon, and they, of course, within weeks, took over Syria with, of course, the overthrow of Assad, which we'll go into later, because right now we're seeing horrifying images from Syria, from places like Damascus, one of the oldest cities in the world, from ancient Sumerian times, getting absolutely pummeled by bombs right now. Horrible, horrible things. They basically prop them up with these Israeli government operatives with Jolani. So anyway, continuing on, it says, critics like MK Gilad Kariv warned that such rhetoric risks global isolation, endangers soldiers, and undermines Israel's democratic and Jewish values, heightening fears of policy radicalization. No, they just don't want to say this stuff out loud. This is basically what we're seeing here. So outrageous claims, but of course, not surprising. I mean, we already have seen these calls before by ministers and by major figures in Israel. So it shouldn't be surprising. But all the while, we see France recognizing the state of Palestine, which is pissing off big time Benjamin Netanyahu right now. But of course, it's too little too late. And that's kind of the point. They act like, oh, look, we're on this side and those guys are on that side. And they're creating the order of the new world order, if you will, right now in front of us. This is what this side thinks. This is what that side thinks. And it's fake. It's false. It's nonsense. It's completely off kilter with the reality that we've seen in the last 2 years of absolute devastation. Not just that, for the last 77 years since the Nakba. The fact that, now that we're recognizing Palestine as a state, yeah, it's already devastated. Holocaust literally means, war by fire. And what we've seen in Palestine, everything's wiped out. I mean, these cities are absolutely cratered. There's no buildings left. It's gone. And then they keep sending people back saying, oh, we have a ceasefire. Go back to Palestine. Go back to Gaza. and then they get there and then they bomb them again. I mean, it's just so awful. And now we're going to recognize it as a state. Look at what they've already done. It's all just theater at this point, what these global governments are doing. Obviously, we should recognize the people there that live in those lands and have lived there for a long time, like the Palestinians, the Bedouins that go back like 10,000 years, by the way, long before any Jewish settlements were there. But the point is, they create this veneer to pretend as though they are somehow virtuous, and they aren't. The French government is not virtuous. Let's not fall for that. Now, the continuation of what we're seeing with Iran, look, they called for a ceasefire after Trump sent Hellfire missiles to Israel to then preemptively attack Iran, after being framed for a bunch of things, after being propped up by the U.S. in the first place, after being overthrown in 1953 in the military coup, and then the creation of the Islamic Revolution in 1979, all by Western interference, and then killing of Soleimani in January 2020 by Trump, and then the Iraq war and all that stuff. Now we see Iran will not end its nuclear program and is ready for war after the U.S. government attacks them, claims they wiped out their nuclear capabilities. Then the U.S. said, actually, we have no evidence of that. And actually, they're only months away from having it now, just like they've said since the 90s. And then until recently said, well, actually, they're just weeks away from having nuclear capabilities. Then they bomb them. And then they say, once again, oh, they're just months away. See, they're perpetuating this. And this comes as Trump signs a deal to have AI governments over nuclear war, nuclear facilities, and nuclear weapons in his big, beautiful bill. And Iran is obviously not going to end its so-called nuclear program. The continuation of the normalization of this weapons of mass destruction myth, which we've seen in the war in Iraq, we're seeing today. We've seen that with Vietnam. We've seen that with so many times before. I would say brace yourself, because this is not going away anytime soon. And I think in the next year, we are definitely going to see more bombings on Iran, unfortunately, as they step things up and normalize us to it, and then give us a little bit of peace for a bit of time, all fabricated, all manufactured, until then they come in with further attacks. Mystery explosions just keep happening all over Iran. Yeah, so mysterious. And we are being warned that the Iranians are ready to hit deep into Israel again. I mean, give me a break. They've been saying this for 30-something years. And then, of course, they fabricate some attacks between Iran and Israel in places like Lebanon. And, you know, it's always kind of funny when we hear the Israeli government say, oh, well, Iran is arming and funding these terrorists. Israel and the United States are the MVPs of arming and funding terrorists. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, Mujahideen, Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, all of them are helped to be armed and funded by Israel and the US. And, oh, well, what about Qatar? Yeah, well, Qatar has huge military deals with the US. How do you think all this adds up to that? And then Qatar is friends with Iran, and it's part of the Arab League. And it's like people don't understand all these things are manufactured. They're all connected. And what we're seeing in Iran will continue, and they will falsify information, spread fear, and bring in this normalization of war between the countries while people wait for the government to save them from the government. It is the typical way of the government cuck, as in total dependence. The Cradle.co says aid convoy reaches Syria's Suwaida as government siege continues. Suwaida remains under siege following horrific sectarian massacres carried out by government forces against the Druze religious minority, which is something I predicted in a video back in 2018. And not because I can read the future, it's because we've already gone into this before. The CIA had documents, including one called, back in the 1980s, including one called Bringing Arms to Bear in Syria, where they go into how they would overthrow Assad at the time, Assad Sr., and utilize militants that are funded by the West coming from Iraq, Turkey, and Lebanon into the country, and no shots would be fired. They'd overthrow the Assad government and bring in these people, which again is exactly what happened. HTS, formerly Al-Nusra Front, Jolani, armed and funded by Israel, very pro-Israeli, very anti-Palestine, very strange for Wahhabist Muslims, isn't it? And then add in the fact that in these CIA documents, they say the first thing they will do is go after the Druze communities, Alawites, Sunnis, Christians. This is exactly what has happened. We talked about this in a video in 2018, in April 2018. We've done videos looking back at that before. Just recently, I urge people to check out our videos on Syria that go back a very long time. But I mean, I've actually been quoted by Assad before in interviews years ago after the fake chemical attacks. But anyway, the point is, what we are seeing there now is this continuation of the Israeli takeover of the region. And we see the massacring happening over there so they could destabilize it, cause more refugees. And then they could say, look how dangerous and extreme it is. Israel needs to take over that country because they're our allies in the region and they're going to save us. That's what they're going to say. That's the excuse, the pretext they will give. And it's all manufactured because Israel brought those people in the first place. But nonetheless, then they go in and take over that region and further along their goal into the greater Israel project. To me, it seems so blatantly obvious what the agenda is overall here. Turkey flexes muscles with new bunker buster and hypersonic weapons. They're getting really involved. Ankara showcases ballistic and missile capabilities similar to those recently used by Israel, Iran, and the United States. Because it's all one big club, my friends, in the military-industrial complex. And well, not only are we not in it, we're the targets. The Cradle.co writes 10 to 12 days. Trump shortens deadline for Ukraine-Russia peace deal. The U.S. president has escalated weapons shipments to Ukraine despite vowing to end the war in 24 hours during his presidential campaign. Yes, indeed. And he's also asked, he threatened to bomb Moscow previously. We did a video on that recently as well that you could check out on our channel on Rumble or BitChute, where he openly said that he threatened Putin that he'd bomb Moscow, and then he threatened Xi that he'd bomb I think it was Shanghai. And again, this is exactly, no, it was Beijing. This is exactly the kind of rhetoric that we get from Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton and Biden and Obama and Bush and Cheney and all those people and the neocons that Trump is bowing to now, like Lindsey Graham, who were part of the Never Trump coalition trying to get him impeached. But of course, he's heavily blackmailed, likely by Epstein and the whole organization that's involved in that. And will continue all the same stuff that everyone else involved in the U.S. government and politics have for so long, because that is the agenda that was rolled out long ago. And of course, this overall agenda to arm and fund Ukraine. This also includes Trump asking Zelensky recently if he could strike Moscow with long-range missiles. And Zelensky said, yes, if you send us more long-range missiles, we could do that. So there's that. Meanwhile, Medvedev warns Trump's deadline is a step towards war. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev says, and I quote, Trump's playing the ultimatum game with Russia, 50 days or 10. He should remember two things. Russia isn't Israel or even Iran. Two, each new ultimatum is a threat and step towards war, not between Russia and Ukraine, but with his own country. Don't go down the Sleepy Joe road, says Medvedev. Well, he's right, but of course it's all manufactured. He keeps threatening in this way. Like he said that Iran had 10 days and then bombed them the next day. Trump says, I gave Putin 50 days. Now he might get less. I'm disappointed in President Putin. It's the same old rhetoric. And by the way, with Iran's one of the top allies of Russia and China. And this is part of the control collapse and the shift from the west to the east, to that Eastern Bloc, to the New World Order, to the technocratic world order system with digital IDs and social credit and food rations and all that stuff. Poland wants U.S. nukes on its soil to deter Russia. Wow, great. That's just another move in that direction as well. Polish President Andrzej Duda has urged Trump to deploy nuclear weapons in Poland, calling it a necessary step as NATO's borders have shifted east. Duda argued that if Russia can place nukes in Belarus, the U.S. should do the same in Poland, a move certain to provoke Moscow. With fears growing that Trump's peace talks could strengthen Russia, he's hoping the U.S. agrees to Poland's nuclear request. This is a big part of that fear-mongering campaign as well, but also the normalization overall. And I have a video coming up soon on Germany. I've been compiling insane things that are happening in Germany one by one lately, and it's no coincidence, but I'm going to mention one of the examples. Germany plans to recruit 40,000 teens a year Military goes flexible, fast, and voluntary. Germany's going all in on defense, aiming to enlist 40,000 18-year-olds annually by 2031 for voluntary military service. But they also have new rules in for conscription. They also have new rules in for mandatory military aid and, of course, food rations. They are also simultaneously calling for woke conscription to conscript people of all genders, they say. And this is all to what? Protect what? Protect what you have at home. What is it left at home? They've already destroyed these countries. They've demoralized the people. They've destroyed the economies. They made it so that it's absolutely pathetic. There's no historical value or context left to the countries that you're supposed to be serving. And serving, you're not serving any country. You're serving a state. You're serving a government that wants you enslaved and dead, clearly. So it's another step towards war between NATO and Russia, which in 2024, in January 2024, we went over a leaked government memo, which was from Germany, which said that by July of 2025, there'd be war between Russia or NATO and Russia, including Germany at the forefront of it. Now, of course, these things are rarely ever on time. We reported on it at the time. That is the leaked memo, but we know that that is the overall agenda because they literally had a map out of step-by-step what would happen. And as I said at the time, the actual timeline doesn't necessarily matter. It is the fact that they have these things mapped out so much like they are scripting out the whole event, because they are scripting out the whole event. And that's why all these Western and Eastern countries are propped up by the Western powers in the first place, like the US. German general urges Ukraine to strike Russian airfields. Moscow earlier suggested that Berlin is becoming dangerous again, while accusing it of supporting the West's militarization. Of course they are, and they're getting armed and funded by Trump, and Trump is pushing the NATO to spend more money on war, which people are for some reason praising. Like, oh, well, they're not screwing us anymore. Well, we shouldn't be involved in NATO anyway. We shouldn't be involved in the arming and funding of rebel groups and proxy governments, and we shouldn't be involved in, of course, raising more money stolen from the taxpayer in order to attack countries. It's insane. And Germany has basically been the only European country to officially declare war on Russia. And they have recently done more meetings with France and the UK. So, and I think they did that in Istanbul recently again. Now, there's war on all fronts right now. Another war, Thailand and Cambodia clash at border. Insane stuff coming out of that, as at least 14 people have died and dozens have been wounded in a fresh clash between Thailand and Cambodia at the shared border. The fighting is centered on disputed border areas near some ancient Hindu temples. Crazy. They want this worldwide, and it's exploding. Border crisis escalates. Over 100,000 flee as Thailand and Cambodia exchange heavy fire. Then there's India and Pakistan. Then there's China and Taiwan. And then in a lot of ways, there is the US and Mexico right now. And I live in Mexico, and as many of you know, and it's been clear that after arming and funding cartels for years and then causing instability between the countries and then shipping in their own drugs and then calling it and then or blaming Russia, or not Russia. Well, actually they're blaming Mexico for it, but they're saying Russia is working and meddling with Mexico. Same with China and Iran. And I predicted this years ago that they would falsify this kind of stuff, utilizing the IEDs on the border and say that, oh, it's Iranian or it's Russian. Well, that's exactly what they're doing now. And they're claiming that because Mexico has military parades with Russia and China in Monterrey City. It's not every year, but often. Therefore, they are a big threat to the United States, and therefore there needs to be military action against Mexico, which is insane. But of course, it's furthering the destabilization of the countries in order to bring everyone to heel and to bring in emergency orders and to bring in the digital IDs and food rations. And they have the United Nations Pact for the Future, which 193 countries signed on to, which basically guarantees that they can shut down your bank account and shut you down financially if you disagree with the government. They could force food rations on you. They can use social credit against you and biometrics. This is all an excuse, a pretext to bring in this new system of governance. And it'll be total technocracy. And Trump has put $500 billion into AI initially on his second day and has doubled that now with overall funding for AI infrastructure, including his recent deal with the Saudis and shaking hands with them alongside Elon Musk, Qatar, Alex Karp, CEO of Palantir, as they create the database on all Americans, which they'll use under the guise of national security concerns in the time of war or instability. And of course, whatever emergency order they need to bring in this stuff, by the way, and a financial collapse, bring in CBDCs. He met with the Saudis as well, alongside Jelani in Syria. This is all very clearly an overall manufactured event. And of course, met with people like Larry Fink of BlackRock, and of course, Larry Ellison and Sam Altman of OpenAI. And it's so obvious to me where this is all going. We've done large deep dives into this before. I urge you to check out those videos, but nonetheless, we need to be aware of what's happening right now, because we are seeing a shift in the global order away from the Western run world order into the Eastern one, all propped up by the West in the first place for themselves to collapse. They're committing suicide in order to shift into this new system. And it was always planned that way. It's not this side versus that side. It's all been manufactured. Russia, Israel, the United Nations propped up in World War I, World War II. Of course, Vietnam, 1934, FDR, arming and funding Ho Chi Minh, which then they fought against his weapons later. 1953 military coup in Iran, overthrowing their government, and then going on to 1979 Islamic Revolution. We have, of course, China, 1948, helping them prop up their revolution and then their communist revolution, and then shifting over to 1973. Henry Kissinger meeting with Mao Zedong, creating an alliance with China, an artificial one, in order to prop them up for trade versus the rest of the world, giving them a monopoly and saving them from the starvation event they were dealing with. That leads into the creation of the Trilateral Commission with Zbigniew Brzezinski and the Rockefellers to create a guinea pig state out of China. This is happening at the same time as they make this oil deal with Saudi Arabia for the petrodollar after they get rid of gold. And of course, they also simultaneously arm and fund the Taliban, Mujahideen, Al Qaeda, and then later on ISIS, Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, etc. This is all while they're arming and funding Iraq's Ba'athist Party in 1968, 1983. Then they go to war with all these countries, and then we could fast forward to Ukraine, 2014, Mayday massacre, false flag again, and there's so many examples of that. And all of these things are manufactured, is what I'm trying to say. And then it all leads to this artificial shift from the West to the East, out of chaos. Order out of chaos is the name of the game, is a modus operandi. And one of the biggest things is it's not a war between this country or that country, that religion or that religion, that nationality or that nationality, that race or that race, whatever. It's a war on humanity itself. And the basis of humanity is individualism, freedom, self-responsibility. Those things are all synonymous. And if they're trying to go after that, then the solution is to be more of all those things. So, as always, when I close these off, I want to give people real world solutions as we're seeing this chaos around the world, which I don't want fear. Don't fall for the fear. Instead, demand your own freedom. And that comes from you as an individual. I urge you guys to check those links below. We have things like heavensharvest.com for long-term storable foods that are non-GMO. There's organic kits, heirloom seeds, water filtration and storage, books on how to get started, freeze-dried foods. Use code WAM, W-A-M, and you will get 5% off as well as free shipping on these orders in the United States. So this is a no-brainer, my friends. They want you starving and they want you on their ration foods with their biometrics. And this, I make pretty much nothing off of. I think I've made $18 this month off of this. This is not about making money. I turn down things to make money that make me money in order to give you guys real world solutions. We have whambeef.com for 10 plus year shelf life, freeze-dried steak. There's 12 servings per bag. There's freeze-dried chicken and ground beef as well. Use code WAMBEEF, WAMBEEF, all one word, and you'll get 20% off on your order. So I highly recommend people get on that. Stock up, my friends, so you aren't dependent on their system down the road. It's a no-brainer again. We have our new link for vni.life/WAM, WAM, linked in the description, where you can you can get these super supplements from Victory Nutrition International. They're science-backed. They have countless studies on this. They have amazing information on this. I highly recommend people check out Protovite, 100 plus vitamins and minerals, phytonutrients, and again, great for cellular health. The videos of it are absolutely amazing. In 5 minutes, cells literally detoxifying in your blood. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So again, use code WAM15, WAM15, and you will get 15% off on your order. I highly recommend people do that, as well as subscribe, and you'll get further savings. Of course, we have our link for Wild Pastures, where you'll get 20% off for life plus $15 off your first box of 100% grass-fed and finished pasture beef, pasture-raised pork, pasture-raised chicken, and wild-caught seafood. No mRNA, no GMOs, no hormones, no antibiotics, no feedlots, steroids, chemicals, or pesticides of any kind. All raised on regenerative family farms in 48 U.S. states, delivered to your door, temperature controlled and customizable as you see fit. Again, use our link. You save your local farmers, you save your own money, and you save your health as well. Highly recommend people get on this now. That link is in the description, as always. And of course, as we close this off, you can help support us if you go to our gogetfunding.com campaigns, our Patreon or Subscribestar. Anything helps to keep us alive. We've lost 90% of our money since January, where we're already bankrupt. If you pledge $4.99 a month or more, you will get exclusive content on Patreon, Subscribestar, as well as on X at @WorldAltMedia. We also have a PayPal address, ancientwondersTelevision@gmail.com, and you can donate in Bitcoin by scanning this Bitcoin link or this Bitcoin QR on the screen. You can also find our Bitcoin address in the description in text form. We have a Cointree link, excuse me, with a bunch of different cryptocurrencies that you could donate in if you please, including privacy coins. Highly recommend that as well. And anything to help us, we truly appreciate it. You guys are the heartbeat of independent media. We have a Teespring store with merchandise that you can find below in the links. And as always, you can find us on Telegram, Rockfin, Band.video, BitChute, Odyssey, Rumble, and Brighteon at World Alternative Media. We're on Hive, Steemit, and Vigilante.tv at Josh Sigurdson. And on the Bad Guys, TikTok and Instagram, World Alternative Media, Twitter and Getter at World Alt Media, and all the major podcast platforms except for Spotify, where, of course, we're banned. Hit that like button, share on social media, hit the notification bell, and hit subscribe if you have not yet already, my friends. And until next time, live freely, live by example. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth. Be the change.